Okay, hello again. In our last class, Dr. Williamson was with us discussing the nature of conflict, particularly the balance between assertiveness and cooperativeness and how that affects our approach to conflict. We were looking primarily at the theoretical approaches to understanding groups, group behavior, and particularly conflict within groups. I want to revisit briefly three of those areas today just so that we have a little more pragmatic, practical application of how to manage conflict. This is such an important dimension of what we're talking about in here, and it's going to be crucial to your role in the workplace, to your family relationships, and so I want to be sure that we've got a little practical advice that goes with all of that theory. First thing we're going to be looking at is actually at an interpersonal level, but this will lead to organizational, as we'll see shortly. How you can handle conflict assertively when it's a one-on-one kind of relationship. Then we'll go back again and revisit, but with a little more consideration, those 5 areas such as accommodating, collaborating, competing, and so forth that are choices that you have when you're in a group situation and you have to decide how you're going to respond. And that will also lead us eventually to organizational theory because so many decisions within the organization are made within teams or within groups. And the third area that we'll briefly look at is Dewey's problem-solving approach, and we'll consider how that's applicable to you as an individual trying to make decisions, as well as how a corporate structure or a large organization of any sort can use that same problem-solving approach in order to solve problems. So we're going to shift from interpersonal to group and then eventually, of course, to organizational, because that's where we're headed next in terms of theory. Okay, if you're the one involved in this situation and you need to confront somebody else, there's some sort of conflict situation and it's your job to go in and talk to the other person, the first thing that you want to do is identify the goal that you're seeking. Why are you contacting that person? What is the reason that you're coming together? Is the person not filing reports well? Are there mistakes in the reports? Just what is it that's going on that's your reason for confronting them in the first place? Okay, the second thing you're going to do, hopefully, is choose the best time to speak. Okay, can you think of some times that might be bad times to speak to someone? Anybody awake out there yet? Okay, well, you kind of have to know the other person. Sometimes first thing in the morning is not real good. Now, for me, that would be fine because I'm a lark. Remember Owls and Larks back there from the nonverbal unit. I'm up early, I'm alert, but there's some people that are still in a fog until 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and trying to talk with them about anything wouldn't be good. Would it be good to confront somebody in front of their peers? Probably not. In front of their coworkers, even in front of their best friend. So picking the time might very well involve choosing a time that you could get that person alone, discuss it privately. After we'd had this unit in one course, one of the students came back to me and said that they'd really taken that to heart and it was good advice and it just came into play immediately. It was a fellow who was part of a little would-be famous rock group, and they'd had a problem. The day I spoke that evening, they performed, and their drummer had shown up drunk again for like the 4th or 5th time, and they'd talked to him about it. But they realized that it wasn't doing any good to confront him while he was inebriated. The next day, he didn't remember. So, you would think folks might figure that out anyway. But anyway, they had several people go in that case to corroborate the situation, so it wasn't just one person of, I think you were drunk. No, I wasn't, and so forth. But choosing the time is important. At the minimum, it's a kind thing that you can do. It's a considerate, tactful thing so that you don't embarrass the other person. You're likely to make better progress in the whole discussion if it doesn't start off on the wrong foot by also contributing by embarrassing. Okay, but before you ever confront that person, it's a good idea to rehearse the statement. What is it that you're going to say when you get into this situation? I think you're the world's lousiest secretary. You're a horrible worker here. I wish you'd just go somewhere else. No, we talked in the interpersonal unit about being descriptive rather than evaluative. And one of the things you would want in your statement would be a good description of what the problem is, and you would want to clarify that in a way that would be concrete, descriptive, rather than judgmental, placing blame on the other person. But you know that when you're going in to hit your parents up for something, or you're going on a job interview, most important things that you do, you rehearse and you practice ahead of time. Well, okay, if they say this, I'll say that. If they say that, I'll say this. And you anticipate how things could go. That takes us back to constructivism and schemata and some of those things that we've already talked about, how we see the world and how we anticipate our courses of action. And so rehearsing is one of the ways that we prepare ourselves for the possible options in that situation. Okay, related to descriptiveness, you want to be sure as you rehearse and formulate your statement that you pinpoint the specific behavior that you want to discuss. And remember when we talked about gunny sacking, don't collect a bunch of rocks, or if you want the saving stamp metaphor, don't collect all your stamps to trade them in at the end. But address things while the issue is still small, while you can pinpoint specifically what it is that needs working on, whether it's lateness, sloppy work, gossiping at the office, spilling coffee on the computer. I don't know. The possible problems one could address are endless and all. But it's important that you, as the one being assertive in this situation and managing the conflict, are very specific about what it is. Now, often it's appropriate for you to explain your reaction to the other person's behavior. Okay? Because usually people do things because they don't see any problem with what they're doing. Generally we don't go around trying to annoy our coworkers, trying to annoy our family members. Okay? We just kind of live our lives doing things the way we've always done them and what seems reasonable to us. So it's often the person doing the confronting who has the problem. If it just makes you crazy that the toothpaste cap is never on the toothpaste, or that your significant other wads the wash rag up in a knot, and lets it dry into a hard ball. Anybody live around people that do that? Okay, we got a few out here. I was talking to a marriage counselor one time who said that was one of the big issues, one of the big little issues in marriages. Do you wring out the wash rag and hang it neatly on the side of the bathtub or wherever it belongs, or does it get squished up in a ball and get parked and then it dries into that hard knot? Another one was, which end of the toothpaste do you squeeze? How many squeeze from the top? There's one over there, or two. Okay. How many squeeze from the bottom? Anybody squeeze from the middle? I think I'm a middle squisher. I don't know. Yeah, there's, okay. Yes, for the middle. Okay. See, but sometimes it's the little things that make you crazy. So you need to explain your reaction to the other person's behavior. It's making me crazy that you ruined the toothpaste tube by squeezing it in the wrong place. Now those things, generally some things like that can be solved. You simply buy 2 tubes of toothpaste and, mine and yours, and but then we get to, did you leave yours in the wrong place? But whatever it is that's making you crazy, that's causing the conflict, I'm the one with the problem. I feel frustrated when you don't do work on time because it makes my work late. I feel angry when you interrupt me in front of colleagues because I feel put down and disrespected. But instead of saying, well, you're just rude because you always do such and such, that approach places blame And we've discussed some of that before. Anyway, but it's important when you're trying to manage the conflict that you explain your reaction to the behavior. Okay, and then related to that, you need to tell the other person, put this under, I think you can see it better. You need to tell the other person what you want. So what are you asking me to do? Stop brushing my teeth? Oh, no. Darn, if it's mom and the teenager. No, you still have to brush your teeth. But would you please put the cap on so the toothpaste doesn't dry out? Would you please pick up your clothes so other people don't walk on them? Could you please take your dishes to the sink when you're through eating? Whatever it might be. Okay, so you make the request. And it needs to be clear, and it needs to be doable. Okay. Now, sometimes you also need to describe the consequences. And this takes us back to our compliance gaining strategies and the kind of power that the other person has. But, you know, if it's a powerful enough relationship, if you don't do this, the consequence may be that you need to look for another job. It depends on what kind of negotiating tools you have in the situation. I can remember one acquaintance of mine who was about 5'2", and she had 3 big sons. Her husband was a big guy, and all 3 boys got their dad's genes. And so here's this little tiny woman bossing these big guys around. And she was saying things like, I want you to do your laundry, etc., etc. And they're going, you know, and one even picked her up and lifted her up and said, yeah, Mom, what are you going to do if I don't? And she stood up big and tall and folded those little arms and said, I'm going on a cooking strike. There will be no more hot meals in this house until the laundry is done. He grinned, set her down, said, gee, guess I better go do my laundry, huh? See, so you have all kinds of tools at your disposal. But what are the consequences? What will the consequences be if the behavior doesn't change? And hopefully, you know, you won't have to be too coercive or too powerful, but by confronting the other person, discussing it in an intelligent, rational manner, the conflict will be resolved. And again, make sure you're clear on the difference between the word assertive and aggressive. Dr. Williamson talked about both of those terms last time, but aggressiveness has that hostility, that abrasiveness, the tone that we don't want. Assertiveness is simply looking out for yourself, you know, being confident enough and firm enough to speak up for yourself when your interests are at stake. Okay, we're going to go back and, as I indicated, and revisit conflict briefly because we were a little bit pushed for time in the last class, and I want to be sure that everyone is clear on the options that you have available to you when you are trying to decide how you're going to manage conflict. And just very briefly, remember we said that conflict involves discord in action, feeling, or affect, antagonism in interest or principles. There are often incompatible goals that are involved in that situation. And we had, let's see, I'll skip over a couple of these. Okay, the first approach, which really isn't much of an approach, is avoiding. Okay, and we can avoid things physically or we can avoid them psychologically. Now, can you think of any situation where it might be appropriate to avoid a situation or to avoid the conflict? Do you always want to get right in the middle of conflict? I don't. I don't like it very much. So part of it is a self-survival thing for me as well. Okay. Sometimes where it's appropriate to avoid is a situation where the issue is trivial. Sometimes, let me change colors again. These are not showing up as well as I would like. Let's see if this one's more readable. Okay, sometimes you may have heard somebody use an expression like, I'm not going to die on this hill. You ever heard that? Pick your battles. It's just not worth fighting this one. If it's something that's not important to you, or if there's no chance of winning, or if the disruption in the situation is going to outweigh the benefits of trying to resolve it. Sometimes you just need a cooling off period. Okay? And sometimes other people can resolve the conflict more effectively. Just let the boss take care of it, let the teacher take care of it, just let your parent, or if you're the parent, let the child work it out themselves. There's sometimes that it's just more appropriate for the other person to do it. However, if you should not avoid situations where it's inappropriate to avoid, don't want to get a double negative here. If the issue is important to you, then you don't just let it drop to the wayside. Sometimes it's your responsibility to make the decision, and so you have to get involved. And even though you might like to avoid, it's your job, and therefore you should do it. The issue has to be resolved. Maybe you're under a time deadline. Prompt attention is needed so that we can get on with whatever the matters involved are. So those are some conditions under which you avoid or don't avoid. Okay, our second option was accommodating. And this is the mindset you have when you're trying to maintain harmony. Okay, you're trying to maintain harmony in the relationship or in the group. It may be individual or it may be in a group situation. Okay, can you think of times when you might accommodate? Okay, have you ever been wrong? I have. And sometimes that's a good time to accommodate. When you just recognize that you made a mistake and you need to say, you're right. Let's go back and do this over. Let's approach it a different way. I'm sorry. Can we forget this, start over? Depends on what it is, what language you would use. Okay, if the issue is more important to the other person or to the rest of the group, if it's really not important to you and it seems really important to them, then okay, whatever, we'll go along with you on it. Preserving the relationship is important. Or if you're dealing from a position of weakness, you don't have much authority here anyway, you're probably going to be outvoted, and you can see the handwriting on the wall, so you're just going to agree and go along with it to start with, and that way you look like a nice person instead of putting up a battle. Okay, the flip side of that, it's not appropriate to be accommodating if the issue is important to you. And there are all kinds of reasons that issues are important. Maybe you're having a company discussion over vacation dates, and there's something that you really need to do, an occasion you want to make out of state, a wedding you're going to or something. Sometimes it's important to you, and so you don't just play Mr. or Ms. Nice Person and go on with it. Okay, if you believe that you're right, kind of ties us back into the rhetorical sensitivity and noble selves and rhetorical reflectors and so forth. But if you believe that you're right, you really do think that you have the accurate information and truth is on your side, then you may not want to give in to that situation and be accommodating just to be nice. Okay, it's inappropriate if a temporary solution may provide more time to reach an agreement in the near future. So all of these are kinds of factors that you want to take into account. Okay, you remember the third option? Okay, a third choice that you have is competing. There are some situations where avoiding and accommodating are not appropriate. That competing is what you're supposed to do, or competing is what you need to do, depending on whether this is an individual choice. But there are some times that it's your football team or baseball team or basketball team versus another's. Do we want the Cougars to be accommodating and say, oh, that's okay, UT, you can win this time. Oh, go ahead, A&M, just take the trophy. We don't mind because no. We're supposed to compete. That's the nature of the situation. And sometimes it's an individual competition. Sometimes it's a team competition. It may be regional offices versus one another and so forth. So some situations where competing is appropriate. If the issue is trivial, they might be like, maybe you're throwing darts and it's just a game, not psychological darts, but you're playing some sort of game. Well, good, you're supposed to compete. If you're playing Monopoly or Bridge or chess or whatever your thing is, it wouldn't work if you didn't compete. Okay, sometimes a quick decision is needed, and we need to get in there and fight for our ideas and push for the particular situation. If an unpopular course of action is about to be implemented, then to compete and try to deal with that may be relevant. If other people are going to take advantage of your non-competitive behavior, and that's one that I have to, while I'm competitive with myself and push myself to lots of goals and things, sometimes with other people I tend to do that avoiding, back off, not compete sort of thing. But if the people are likely to take advantage of you because of that, then you need to be aware of that, and competing does become appropriate. Finally, if other people lack the expertise to make the decision, they just really don't know what they're doing, and you do know. I'm trying to think what. Oh, okay. In my case, an example might be writing a set of bylaws. Okay, I've had years of experience helping organizations write their bylaws and get them in conformity with the state and the IRS and so forth. And so this would be an area that I don't know that I know everything, but I know a lot about it. And if I had some little student group or some group that just didn't know much about that, that lacked expertise, it might be very appropriate for me to say, no, you need to stop here. You need to put in information about your meetings. You need to put in information about the powers of your board of directors, whatever the case may be. Okay, it's inappropriate. Competing is inappropriate if the issue is complex, if the issue is unimportant to you, if both parties are equally powerful. You're going to end up in a standoff. You need one of these other approaches like collaborating or compromising. If a quick decision is not needed, then you don't need to duke it out right there on the spot. Take some time, use Dewey's reflective thinking pattern that we're going to review in just a minute. And if other people have the expertise that's needed, that might be a time that you avoid or that you acquiesce if someone else knows more about it than you do. Okay, then let them handle it. Okay? Okay, a third option is collaborating. A fourth, what did I say? Last? No, we're not there yet. I don't know. We're on number 4. Listen to what I mean, not what I say. Okay. When we're committed to resolving a conflict, and when you can collaborate and work it out so that everybody reaches consensus and is happy with the goal, then or with the outcome, that's a good thing. And so collaborating works in those situations where the issue is complex, where both parties' concerns are too important to be compromised, if a long-term relationship needs to be maintained. I think it was in my discussion with you in groups we said that people get down and dirty and make decisions fast if they don't anticipate working with the people again. But if these are people, if this is tenured faculty, if these are partners in a law firm, then this may be a situation where they need to work together and try to reach some consensus rather than just competing and voting and seeing who wins. Okay, commitment is needed for successful implementation when you're collaborating, and you need time available to work through those things. So the flip side is it's inappropriate, or collaborating just doesn't work very well if the issue is simple. What's there to collaborate on? We're either going to do it or not do it. If an immediate decision is required, then you probably hope you have a benevolent dictator who can make a wise decision and just do it. We'll come to managerial styles as we get into organizational communication. If the other person is concerned about the outcome of the event, okay, if they're unconcerned about it, then don't bother with them with being involved in the decision. They're going to acquiesce and go along with whatever is involved. Now sometimes you can't reach consensus. The interests are different enough, there are enough different viewpoints and so forth. Sometimes you can compromise. Okay, and that's your fifth option. I'm on the right number now. Compromising is relevant when the goals of the parties are mutually exclusive. We can't all have what we want right now. Maybe this is the great budget battle for the year. Okay? And so all parties are powerful, but we can't all have our way. So maybe we both take a cut in budget so that each gets a piece of the pie. Depends on what it is. But consensus cannot be reached. You're under time constraints. Sometimes a temporary solution to a complex problem is needed. Okay, kind of like with the flood at U of H when they moved all the offices over to Hoffheinz Pavilion. Not all offices, but a lot of the offices over to Hoffheinz. That was a temporary solution to a problem. Okay, compromising is inappropriate when, doesn't work very well, when one party is more powerful, because they would dominate anyway and they're not likely to compromise if they don't have to. If the problem is complex enough to need a problem-solving approach, and we're going to review that approach in just a minute. There's sometimes that collaborating and compromising only get you to a certain point. And remember when I talked with you about groups, we said that the more formal the group is, the more likely it is to use formal procedures. There are sometimes that you actually get into a situation with Robert's Rules of Order. You get to a situation where you need to vote on the issues, and at that point if you're voting, you're to a point that the majority is going to rule. The minority has the right to be heard, but the majority rules. And there are just sometimes those occasions where you can't get everything worked out to everyone's satisfaction. Certainly you want what I call a floating minority. You don't want the same people to lose every time, or they're likely to pack up their toys and go form their own organization. But if this group loses today on the vote, that group loses next time on a vote, but we're all winning part of the time, then we're going to be a happier, more productive group. Okay, some problems are very complicated, and sometimes these are individual problems, sometimes they're organizational problems. Okay, and this takes us back, we hurriedly went through before Dewey's problem-solving approach. But this is such a wonderful little formula, whether you're trying to decide where to go to graduate school, which job to take, or if it's a major corporation like Firestone or Ford trying to decide what to do about tires and all that issue. The first thing that you have to do is define the problem. It needs to be clear. If it's a complicated problem, all of the ramifications of that need to be explored. And in your case, in either case, whether it's group, large organizational, individual, you probably need to be writing things down and making lists as you go. Little problems you can sort out in your head, which, my favorite route on the freeways. Block today, what's my alternate route to get home? That's a little problem, and you probably have the alternatives in your head already, and so you can sort that out and you don't have to sit there and take notes. But if this is a big problem, then keeping good records and working through these stages is even more important. Okay, once you've defined the problem itself, we have classrooms flooded, we need a different place to meet, we have too much pollution in the atmosphere, the ozone level's too high, whatever it is, then you need to analyze the problem. And that means more specifically get into it. How bad is it? This may take quantitative and qualitative research. But how bad is this problem? These are just some sample questions here. Why does it need to be resolved? What are the causes? What are the effects? How extensive are the causes? How extensive are the effects? What do we have? It says what forces are on our side, but what do we have working for us? Are there laws in place right now that can help if we simply enforce them? Do we have a core of volunteers that we can call into action? But anyway, what is the problem? How extensive is it? And this may involve both a statistical examination, a quantitative examination, as well as a qualitative examination of the problem. Okay, now some groups, or some textbooks even, skip this third step, but I like to focus on this one. I think sometimes you'll see it listed and they go straight to how many choices do we have or what are the possible options. That's going to be number 4 with me today. I think before you even get into your alternatives, you need to set up criteria so that your criteria for a good choice. When you go into the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread, what are you looking for? What criteria does it have to meet? The date on the bread. You want an old date or a new date? New date. Okay, you want fresh bread. What else?
Soft.
Soft, okay. Soft bread. What else? But not mushy. Yeah, you don't want any water that got in there and turned it into goo. Okay, we want soft, not mushy, fresh. Anything else? The price, okay. She wants healthy. I have a favorite brand, but I won't advertise here. But there's a specific brand and type that I like best. And I always go look to see if that one's on the shelf, just because I know I really like it. Okay, and if it's not there, then I have to have a backup criterion of, what's the closest thing to my favorite. Okay, so you're very clear on what you want in a loaf of bread. If we had more time, we could do this with hamburgers or pizza or any of a number of other things that you purchase regularly. Okay, well, the same thing applies if you're going to buy a new car, even a new used car. What criteria does it have to meet? If you're going to go to graduate school, what criteria have to be met? Does it have to be close? Does it have to be far away? At the time I picked my PhD program, I had been in Texas for many years. I taught in Florida for 3 years, and there are a number of excellent PhD and speech communication programs out there. So one of the ways I sorted it out was to say, I want to go someplace where it snows, but not all the way to Michigan or Canada. That's a little too much snow, But I want to go north of the Mason-Dixon line. I want to go someplace where I get to play in the snow a little bit. Anyway, and then in my case, I'm of the older generation set. Women with PhDs were pretty rare back when I was pursuing mine. So another important criterion was I want a program that has a female PhD who is a leader in that program. So I know what they look like, what they act like, what they think like, even though you can't generalize too far from that. You know, but those are criteria, and there were probably other women in other programs too. But anyway, well, between the snow and a Dr. Marie Nichols and so forth, I ended up in Urbana, Illinois, for better or worse. You know, and spent a couple of years up there, got my fill of snow, and went back to Florida, and then eventually came back to Texas. Okay, but whether you're picking a graduate program, an automobile, or designing a bridge over the ship channel, you need to set up your criteria on the front end. Can we afford it? You know, how much can it cost? What standards does it have to meet? Whatever the specs are for the job. And then once you've got those criteria, then you're in a position to say, okay, what are our possible solutions to the problem? How many choices do we have here? Okay, how many graduate schools met my criteria? How many automobiles meet your criteria? You know, there's probably a price range there. Does it have, you know, sunroof or not, stereo or not? And when you have to start trading off stereo versus the sunroof versus the price, you know, which thing is most important? But how many choices do you have? And then once you've identified those, then you're going to decide on the solution by applying the criteria to the solution. And that makes it much easier on the front end to weigh those alternatives out and to see your advantages and disadvantages. And certainly you want the advantages to clearly outweigh the disadvantages. Okay. Then you'll have some sort of implementation of the solution, some kind of follow-up on that. So it depends on what you're deciding. There are some situations where it's your job to make the decision, this is the plan we're going to go with, but then it goes to a different department, and they're the ones who actually implement it. So you don't always have to do all of these steps, but sometimes you do. Okay, we're going to change our focus now. We've looked at those three areas of the application of group theory. And we're going to turn our attention next to theories of organizational communication. Okay? Okay, and this is taken out of your workbook, so you shouldn't have to take so many notes here. Okay, there are three basic types of communication within an organization: upward, downward, and horizontal. And if we look back over to transparency here for a minute, most of you are familiar with organizational charts. Okay, you've seen the organizational chart for some organization or another. And some organizations are very tall, some are very flat, and that vertical line within the organizational chart tells you whether who's in charge and who is not, who is dominant, who's submissive in that particular situation. And so you can look at the control lines within the organization by looking at the vertical lines. When you look at the lateral lines in an organizational chart, you're looking at coordination type activities. Okay, in upward communication, we have subordinates talking about themselves, their performance, and their problems. Okay, those are some of the kinds of things that move upward. If the manager walks down the hall and talks to people, and so forth. They also talk about other people and their problems. Okay, think about that. How many of you are employed somewhere? Okay, just think about the kinds of things that you, anybody own the company? Okay, a couple, good. Really?
I do my own training.
Okay, you do your training. Okay, well then you'll be the superiors in a little while. The rest of us will be the subordinates. Okay, but think about then what your employees say to you. But they probably talk about themselves, about their performance. You know, I really had trouble with this report, or gee, this was so much fun to work on, or this was a great project, whatever. They talk about themselves, they talk about other people and their problems. They talk about organizational practices and policies. You know, I think we need more time for lunch. I think we need a training center on site. I think we need a child care center on site. Or I think we need closer parking. I think we need more parking. I think you shouldn't charge for parking. Students do that at U of H too. You know, what are the practices and policies, and finally they talk about what needs to be done and how to do it. Okay, what we need here is, you know, better food, better hours, better air conditioning, better computers, updated software. Somebody was griping to me the other day about his office because they hadn't implemented Office 2000, Word 2000. Yeah, you know, they were just out of date because they were still on 97 or whatever. And, you know, how can you have a top of the line? I don't know. You know, if the word processing works and it makes PowerPoint, I'm happy. But, okay, the upward communication. Oh, here's a little example. Okay, this is an example of the worker explaining the problem and what, in his opinion, needs to be done. Mr. Ford, this car has smoke coming out of it. It needs to be fixed before you can sell it. Shoot, looks like I have to wait for the repairs to be done before I can sell it. So there's Mr. Haynes, the mechanic, telling the CEO, who hates losing money and waiting on things. Okay, in upward communication, it's important, but it's also difficult because of worker vulnerability. Okay? Now around here, once we're tenured faculty, we pretty well speak our mind to whoever will listen to it. Sometimes they just say, no, not now. But in a place where you could get fired on the spot, okay, you're in a very vulnerable position. And those people have to be much more careful about popping into the boss's office and speaking their mind. Okay, but to the extent that the subordinates can talk to the superiors, this reduces the psychological distance between those status levels. If you're in what we call a tall organization, one with many layers, like the University of Houston, then for most of us, it's a very affirming sort of thing to have the dean know our names, to have the provost know our names, to have President Smith know you personally, to be in a position to pick up the phone and call the president's office and say, just wanted you to know the debate teams swept the tournament at the Air Force Academy last weekend, and to have the president say, well, bring them on over and we'll do a little photograph for the newspaper. Okay? And some upward communication like that is good news, and that's a lot easier to relay. Certainly you're in a more vulnerable position if there's some sort of problem, some kind of criticism that you need to be involved with. Okay, upward communication is important also because it can reduce distortion and the withholding of information. Okay, the more links and the more links there are in the communication channels, the more steps a message has to go through, then the greater the chance is for a distortion of that information. And the more layers there are in the hierarchy of the organization, then there's a chance that every one of those, every time the message is transmitted. You know, everybody played the game of gossip as a child. Remember how that, maybe you started on one side of the room with something like George Washington fell off his horse trying to jump across the Potomac River. And by the time it finishes on the other side of the room, George Washington's horse was eating cherries while Washington was swimming in the Potomac River. Or something, it just the more links there are, the greater the opportunity is for distortion. Okay, upward communication is basic to planning, to decision making, and to motivation. It's important to the subordinates because they gain a sense of personal worth. You just feel more valued if somebody higher up takes the time to listen to you. It means that they get to participate in the decision-making process, and usually that makes people feel good if they've had some. Remember when we talked about groups, we said that the people who are active in the discussion process are going to be more satisfied with the outcome than the inactives will be. Well, this is one of those places where a participative style of management, and we'll classify those styles later on, but that participative style or a consulting style gets those people involved and helps them own the ideas, own into whatever decisions are being made. Upward communication is important because it provides feedback to management. Okay, that's one of the ways management finds out whether they're on a good track, whether they've initiated a good plan or not. Maybe you change the holiday schedule, you change the work schedule, you give people for options for split shifts, shared working, a number of things. Well, what do the employees say about that? What do the subordinates say? Are they grumbling and griping, or are they going, hey, this is cool, this is okay, this is working well? It also provides an opportunity for the subordinates to submit their own ideas. Some companies have suggestion boxes, different kinds of open door policies where they can get that input into things. Some even reward employee ideas with treats and bonuses and different sorts of incentives and awards. But most people like it when their ideas get incorporated into something. Okay, here we go again with our little couple. We've got the subordinate, Karen, a chief engineer, and the manager. And Karen is saying, sir, if we use this plastic, then there will not be any smoke from the car. This idea will work. I'm not sure what she's going to do with the plastic there. And he's saying, let me think about it. But this is an example where the subordinate is providing feedback to management, giving her idea for how to solve the particular problem. Okay, this is a way for superiors to measure employee receptivity. How receptive are the people to this, to putting in some new food snack area or maybe food carts in addition to the cafeteria, company cars, whatever it might be. Okay, it's good for superiors because they can get help in problem solving and they can receive important and needed information. Okay, and downward, oh, here we go again. The manager is getting help here, and he's saying, thanks for helping me solve the problem. You two are really good workers. Say, what do you think of my new glasses? A little tangential communication there. Weird, goofy. Okay, but the manager got help in solving the problem from his own employees, and so that was useful. Okay, in downward communication, that's the superior talking to the subordinate, of course. A popular thing that moves downward is stuff like task directives and job instructions. Okay, people are given jobs to do, and that comes down. Okay, downward communication may also involve coordinating information. This may relate the task, increase understanding. You know, here's the job I want you to do, and it's important that you do it because this person over here will be engaged in this project, and we're going to try to pull all of this together by the end of the month or the middle of next month, whatever. All the things like policies, rules, practices, regulations, if you stop and think about it, those are all downward communication. You come into a new job and they're sitting on the shelf for 10 manuals full of information on how we do accounting at U of H, or what the procedures are in a particular company for doing something. Okay? Well, that's downward. That's given from the top to the subordinates, and that's the way they expect things to be done. So standard operating SOP procedures, the rules, the practices of the organization all count as downward. Okay, another area for downward communication is the feedback that's given to the subordinates. Performance evaluation is an example of those. Part-time people, contract people may be evaluated weekly or bi-weekly in other organizations, such as, in the semester in here, you're getting 4 evaluations from me, okay, as the basis for your grade. And that's communication from superiors to subordinates, if you will. Okay, once a year, the faculty goes through review for merit pay increments, and it starts with a peer review, but then it goes on to the director and the dean and the provost and so forth. So that's superior to subordinate communication and its performance evaluation. And then finally, an important area that's downward are the messages to motivate the employees to the organizational goals. Can you think of any ways that companies do that? Okay, hold your mic down.
Merit pay raises.
Okay, if you get any money or not, that's certainly going to be one way. What about literally messages to motivate, like a speech or a printed message? What are you thinking?
Praise.
Appraisal?
Praise.
Oh, just praise. Okay. Yeah, y'all be real quiet. But you're talking. I'm glad you're talking. Yeah, as you praise people, whether praising them specifically for something or generally for a good job that they're doing. Sometimes, is there a hand back there? Okay, hold the mic down.
It reminds me of the pencils and posters that they sell, the inspirational posters they sell at Office Depot.
Okay, yeah, Office Depot and other similar sites have those inspirational posters, and some people put those up in their own offices, but if management is putting those up to inspire people in general, maybe in the food service area, some organizations have in-house newsletters, and those are designed, they may come out weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depends on your group. But that may be a place where they're featuring the employee of the month, they're reporting on sales, they're reporting on things that the team has done as a group that is complimentary, but we need to keep doing this and so. Some groups have daily motivation, others have it spaced out, but any of those flyers, newsletters, posters, bulletin boards, any of those kinds of things may be used to be a form of pep talk. Sometimes it's done face-to-face in staff meetings. Monday morning, 8 a.m., we get the whole group together and try to rev them up, and maybe you meet again at 4 o'clock on Friday to assess the week and keep your mind focused for the weekend. Okay, here's our new employee in the red apron and the manager in the purple apron, and the manager is telling the employee what to do. Now be careful, don't overcook the meat, flip the meat to make it juicy. Okay, boss. Okay, this is just an example of downward communication, but you've got the owner who's experienced and who is obviously the superior, and the new employee who doesn't much know how to cook at this point. Hopefully cook a little bit. Okay, downward communication is wanted by employees. Now, sometimes you may get sick of staff meetings, faculty meetings. I think one of my greatest disillusionments in teaching was to discover that faculty meetings weren't nearly as cool as I thought they would be. You know, when you're in high school and the teachers are all behind closed doors and you think there must be something really cool going on in there, you know, and then when you finally get to go to one and you discover, no, they're wanting reports filled out or, you know, grumping about the grade sheet deadline or whatever. But we need downward communication. We need that feedback about how we're doing, about our performances. We need information about what's going on. When the Great Flood hit U of H, the downward communication was cut off for a while. And there was a lot of lateral communication going on. And I'm sure students called each other and said, what are they going to do about classes? Faculty were calling each other saying, what are they going to do about classes? How are we going to work out that summer schedule? Are we going to be able to get in our offices, et cetera, et cetera? And there was a great sigh of relief, you know, probably rejoicing on the part of the students when the message came on that said, U of H is closed for a week. And everybody went, oh, darn, you know, have to stay home. Okay. But we needed that downward communication to reduce the cognitive dissonance, remember that word, phrase, that most of us were experiencing. But then when it came time to come back to school, we still needed that downward communication. Okay, we're going back, but our building is closed. Then what? You know, and on and on. And we won't go too far with that. Okay. Sometimes there's too much mechanical or written communication. You get so many memos that they start going into the round file. They start going into the trash can. Okay, you know at home, you know, you go through your mail and everything that looks like junk mail, unless you're just having a really slow day, you know, that junk mail just goes straight into the trash can. Well, the same thing may happen within the organization if there's too much written communication. Same thing may happen with email. Okay, I don't know if you're to a point yet where you just go through and massively sweep the email. I see some heads shaking it. Now, there's some, of course, now with cookies, is that what they're called? You know, they get you on hit list and stuff, and you start getting all this junk spam. That's what's, you know, you start getting all this email that you have no interest in. And I may go through and delete 15 or 20 messages. If you're out there, you're the people sending it. Listen, I'm deleting it without opening it. You're wasting your time. Because I don't want to read that stuff. I didn't ask for it, etc. Well, the same thing can happen in the office. If there are too many pieces of paper coming through, announcing things, reminding you of things, it's like I can't get my job done for all the reminders I'm getting on how to do my job. And so you just glance at it and trash it. And as a result, often it doesn't reach the lower levels. Particularly in the long term around here, I'm confessing on public tape now, but there are so many messages that come through from organizations. Would you announce this speaker in your class? Would you announce this drive in your class? Now, if it's free food, I try to tell you. You know, but if I announced every guest speaker that I got a flyer on and read the whole thing to you about that, we'd probably lose 2 hours of class time minimum every semester. And so I have to make the assumption that if you really want to know those things, you'll pick up the Cougar, the Daily Cougar, and look up the day's events, the daily events, and check those things out for yourself. So that's a risk that superiors run when they give all that information downward, that people may just start throwing it in the trash, and it won't reach the lower levels. The other thing that happens is that it may get distorted. Either you don't trust the source or perceptual differences, the number of links in the chain, we were talking about that already. We usually have a little scare around here, January, February each year. A memo comes out from higher up in the administration. I'm not sure who up there starts it, but it will say something like, we're not sure how much money there will be for summer teaching. So faculty should beware, and I mean, it's okay to send it because then they can say, they warned us. You know, there may not be, and warn your students, you know, there'll be a limit. And there are never enough of the required courses that you need because of budget constraints. But it always looks pretty gloomy back about January or February, and then it gets better. And there's only been 1 year in the 32 years that I've been here that we did not have money for summer teaching, and that was long ago. Okay? So anyway, distortion may occur. My perception is they will teach summer school, particularly if it's a funding year from the state legislature. We'll find a way to keep student enrollment up, have extra classes and so on. But, you know, one of these years I could be wrong. I hope not, you know, but I could be wrong. But perceptual differences being what they are, the lack of trust in a message, sometimes you just don't believe the person sending the message. You know, oh, we heard faculty's going to get a 10% pay raise next year. Not happening. I don't believe you. I'm not even going to repeat that one because I don't believe it. If it happens, well then, you know, we'll just all rejoice and that'll be wonderful. Okay, the oral face-to-face messages are important because, like in staff meetings, or if the boss goes down the hall and talks to you, they create a sense of immediacy. And I've talked with students, you know, on any given day in here, there are a chunk of people missing who don't need immediacy, who don't need face-to-face interaction. But in discussing distance education classes with other students, some people are really happy with that, but there are many who want the face-to-face contact. Even when you don't talk to me, there's something that makes you feel better just sitting out there as a live body in a face-to-face kind of situation. Well, this is true in the office environment too, in the work, in the organization, that coming together with the members, coming together with the officers of the civic club, coming together with the officers of the corporation, that face-to-face interaction is just important. But when that happens, we need proper timing. You know, don't schedule it right on top of the office Christmas party or something. We need good information. There needs to be a positive attitude on the part of whoever is in charge. There needs to be planning. You know, you need a good agenda for the meeting, and we won't get into meeting management here. But they need to be good meetings that are upbeat, that have something to say, that provide information so that people don't go away saying, why do we have this meeting? Do you know any more now than you did before we went in? I'm not sure what this meeting was called for. Man, that was a waste of time. You know, you don't want that kind of negativity introduced into the group. Okay, here's Bubby's Restaurant again. And there's face-to-face communicating that's wanted by the employees. So there's Bubby, the manager, talking to Joe, the employee, and Charlie, the new employee. So the manager's saying, guys, here's what you need to do. Do it. And the new employee is saying, please tell me what to do. And the established employees say, I love getting the boss's orders and being told what to do. Well, some of us do, some of us don't. But the point is we need that interaction. And while we may think sometimes we don't want instructions, we're really better off getting them than we would be were we not getting them. You know, being told what I'm supposed to teach when there's actually a negotiated thing around here. But sometimes, like we said, there's over publication, there are too many instructions. But generally, this is a good thing and it's wanted. Okay, horizontal communication is the lateral communication within the group, and this usually involves coordination type activities because nobody's in charge of anybody else. It's important for interdepartmental exchanges, for problem solving, for coordination. The academic advisors are a good example around here of people that are lateral or horizontally communicating. They're equal in status. I guess they could get a pecking order among themselves depending on who had more advisees than somebody else. But as far as the university is concerned, you know, it's equal status. kinds of things. And so they may call about course substitutions or options on a degree plan, something like that. Okay, the horizontal communication reduces the number of links in the communication chain. And when that happens, that reduces the filtering and the distortion, which we've already talked about. So, cutting through all that and just going next door or picking up the phone and calling another department may cut through all kinds of levels of confusion. Okay, this facilitates sharing information, and sharing information, remember information theory? Information reduces uncertainty. Good. Okay, so that's going to help in task effectiveness. Okay, we share information and that helps us get the job done. Okay, another important factor is that it prevents managerial overload. If everything had to go through the manager or the dean or the provost, they're busy enough beyond belief now as it is. And if everything went through their office, across their desk, they'd never get any sleep. They'd never get through. They could not go home for the weekend if all the horizontal and lateral mean the same thing. If all that lateral communication didn't go there, if it had to go all the way to the top of management, you can imagine how busy they would be. Okay, it's also important, horizontal communication is, because it increases worker morale and confidence in problem solving. Okay, generally people feel good when they solve problems for themselves. If the paper's jammed in my printer, and I think now I've found every possible secret hiding place that a piece of paper can hide, but when you got a new printer and you haven't figured out all the places to open things up and you get that jam, well, it's a lot easier to walk next door and ask one of my colleagues, where else do you think paper could be hiding? Can you help me with this? Than to have to go through all the, something like that doesn't belong in the dean's office or the president's office. Even as we adjusted to the flood and adjusted to summer classes and looked at options for how we would make up that week that we lost, there was a lot of lateral communication that went on as faculty talked to each other and decided whether they were going to compress the schedule, whether they were going to put things on reserve in the library and performance classes, whether they were going to alter assignments or create some options, whether they were going to hold Friday classes, hold Saturday classes, hold both. And the end result was that there are a lot of different plans out there, and those of you that are enrolled in more than this class at the taping know that you didn't all end up with the same course of action at the time. Some of you are coming in for Friday or Saturday classes, just different things. But it was useful to the faculty to be able to talk to each other and explore those options. And again, it reduced that managerial overload, which we'll get up here shortly. Okay, horizontal communication may lack control. Okay, this is one of those cases where the grapevine may get going, if there's gossip and rumor transmission within the group. That can be a problem. It should not be a substitute for upward or downward communication. There's something, can you think of something that needs to go through the proper channels that you shouldn't be bypassing on? Okay, well, if there was something like a sexual harassment charge, if there was an appeal about a merit evaluation, some of the things like that are heavier duty kinds of issues, and those need to follow the proper channels. Okay, particularly around here at the university, if there's some kind of an appeal. If a student is charged with cheating, okay, that's supposed to, there are steps in your handbook. If y'all won't need to know that, but but should somebody need to know that, the student handbook gives you the steps for doing those things. The faculty handbook tells us how those things are to be processed and done according to correct procedures. Okay, here are the co-workers communicating and gossips beginning to occur. Buzzard worker B works in the collection department. Sting worker B works in the filtering department. Hey Sting, do you know where I can find more honey? Guys, forget work. Did you hear about what the queen did? Ooh, just go to different trees. You'll find some. Jenny Nosy. It's over there. Oh, anyway, we got honeybees gossiping here. When we get to a different segment of our organizational theory, we'll see that underload is one, not having enough to do is one of the things that sometimes contributes to the gossip and informal network, grapevine kind of phenomenon. If people are busy enough, they don't have time to bother with this. Okay, I think we've got time today. We'll go ahead and take a look at Weber and structural classical bureaucratic theory. I think it's actually a guy named Wyke who gave us the definition that I have up here, that an organization is a system of continuous, purposeful activity. Now think back to all the things that we said about system theory, and we won't go back over those today because we've covered them in detail already. But everything that we talked about with a system, that it's goals-oriented, that it transforms input into output, that wholeness, hierarchy, balance, equilibrium, adaptability, exchange with the environment, all of those things are true of organizations because systems are organized, organizations are systems, and so on. Okay, Weber was particularly interested in power within the organization. And he defined power as the ability to induce acceptance or orders and overcome resistance. Think about that. You know, if you say frog, does anybody jump? Or they just look at you and go, why are you saying frog? Maybe they don't even look at you. Yeah. Some people have power. Some have the ability to get people to do things, and others not. Okay, he used the word legitimation or legitimating. You can use the noun form or the participle. The situation where subjects accept the power because it fits held values. Now think about that for a minute. You know, have you ever had somebody try to boss you around and you just kind of said in your own words, whatever they might be, forget you? You're not telling me what to do. Now, why would you do that?
They're not in the position.
They're not in the position you don't believe to have the power.
Okay, you don't give them the power. You don't grant them the power. They don't have it, and you don't give it to them. And back under Berger, we talked about these things already. There's sometimes people don't have the real power, but you give them the power because you like them, they're significant to you, you share values, that sort of thing. But the power is legitimated, or there's legitimation of the power, whichever way you want to say it, when the subjects accept the power because it fits held values. Okay, so you're being very good students in this class. You're letting the teacher be in charge. Okay? Because I presume that fits your values, or you don't want the camera to catch you not subscribing to those traditional values. But have you ever been in a classroom where the teacher was not in charge? You know, the guilty party will go unnamed here for posterity's sake too. But I visited a school that one of my daughters attended years ago and walked by. I was going in to see the magnet coordinator, but I walked by a classroom where the teacher did not have legitimation of power. The kids were just cutting up and talking, and this was a middle school. They were having a grand time. And she was walking along with a ruler, whacking desks, saying, hush, be quiet, sit down. I told you to be quiet, just up and down the aisle. And they were just blowing her off. I don't know how long that went on, but I thought I'd just probably choke a few to death, and then I wouldn't be employed the next day, and that would take care of that. You know. But there was no legitimation of power in that situation. the subjects, how can you have a queen or a king unless the subjects accept the legitimation of that? Okay, he said authority is similar. It's power viewed as legitimate. So if there's legitimation of power, then you have some authority. Okay, that authority is sometimes justified by tradition. It's traditional that the President of the United States has these powers, the Queen of England has those powers, that a faculty member in a college classroom has certain powers, that the accountant in Corporation X has certain powers. Okay. Parents are supposed to have certain powers. Do they all? No. You watch the little temper tantrums in the grocery store, and then you know which parents have power and which ones don't. And I won't get on that soapbox. Okay. Bureaucratic power is power derived from the accepted system rules. Okay. We've got a lot of bureaucratic power within the University of Houston, but particularly when you're in the postal system or any bureaucratic group where you work your way up through the ranks and you attain different levels, G1, G2, G3, Spec 2, Spec 3, however those things work, and the labels vary according to the particular companies. But whatever the system rules are, once you work yourself to that level, then you've got a set of power, and that's a type of bureaucratic authority. Okay, the third type is the most interesting and sometimes the hardest for the superiors to deal with. It's the charisma, or the charismatic power, which involves the charisma of superior individual personalities, and these defy order and routine. Remember in high school, certain students just had charisma? Maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody you knew, but they were so cute, they were so adorable, they were so dynamic, they were so lively, they were so credible, they were just what the crowd seemed to want at that particular point in time. Makes the teachers crazy. Because you get some character in the classroom with charisma, and the students are looking to that person for leadership rather than the traditional leadership. Probably made the principal even more crazy. Okay, these folks often ended up being cheerleaders or the student commencement speaker, if it was not necessarily the valedictorian. But anyway, charisma is an interesting thing. There have been studies done of charisma, and we know that it involves liveliness and dynamism and competency and experience. And there are a number of factors that go into that, but it's a very real kind of power, and when it's matched against one of these other types, it may have a very conflicting kind of nature to it. I mean, it's very real, it's a very viable thing. Okay, Weber gives us a definition of a bureaucracy. He says the first thing is that it has lots of rules. You certainly know you're in a bureaucracy at U of H. We have lots of rules. Bureaucracy has a sphere of competence. People are assigned to different things. This person does accounting. This one's the cameraman for media services. This person is in charge of purchasing. This, just all over the university. Each faculty member even has a sphere of competence. And there are probably a few exceptions out there somewhere, but by and large, we all teach unique things. Where there's strong student demand, we have some people who can overlap and teach the same class. But generally, each faculty member is hired because of their unique sphere of competence in a particular situation. Okay, a bureaucracy is going to have a pretty tall hierarchy. It's hard to have a bureaucracy that has a president and 8 employees. I mean, you could have a lot of paperwork depending on what kind of company it is. But usually it's a really tall organization with layer after layer after layer in the hierarchy that falls under the bureaucracy domain. Okay, it's going to have some sort of administrators in every department, and as far as I know, I literally checked it out, but every department in the university has an office administrator. Some have more than one, and they're the people that do the payroll and just kind of keep the ship floating and so forth, and provide that liaison activity to keep it all together. Now, another interesting thing about a bureaucracy is that there's no ownership, at least no clear specified ownership. Who owns the University of Houston? Well, I mean, theoretically, the taxpayers of the state of Texas, but are you taxpayers? You have much power and control around here? No. So it's not like owning your own company where you clearly have ownership and have power because of that. So there's no ownership. Who owns the post office? Who owns the school system? The fire department, the police department. There's just a number of organizations like that for which there's no clear ownership. Okay, another characteristic of a bureaucracy is allocation of resources. Even though nobody owns this place, there's a tremendous amount of money that flows through here. And budgets have to be developed, those resources have to be allocated, and so forth. There may be great budget battles by the parties who are involved. Okay? And even though they don't own it, they're part of the organizational system, and so they're involved in it. Records. Lots and lots of records. Okay? And new technologies are at least making that better, so there aren't quite so many tens of thousands of pounds of paperwork stored everywhere. Okay, and then the bureaucracy is going to have a head. Somebody will be in charge. They'll either be elected or sometimes it's an inherited position. But it's not the owner. There's someone who's in charge, but that person is not the owner. Okay, now I call attention to this because all of you, some of you are employed now, but you'll need to make a decision someday whether you want to work in a bureaucracy or not. And it's useful just to kind of think through these things, and we're not going to weigh the alternatives today of bureaucracies or not. But knowing the difference between a bureaucracy and a non-bureaucratic organization can be useful, because when you're in the bureaucracy, you're going to have lots more rules and regulations to follow, more paperwork to do. You're playing by a different set of rules, and that takes us back to communication rules again, and we won't totally revisit that. But those rules are present within the organization, and you'll be playing under a different game plan than you will if you're in a smaller organization. Okay, we're about to work our way into managerial styles, and we'll just kind of touch on this today. But think about what kind of style you have. Are any of you managers now? Sometimes we have people who are working as managers at restaurants or whatever. You people who run your own businesses have a managerial style of some sort. But just ask yourself, if you were put in charge of a work group, if you were put in charge of a company, whatever, what is your view of people? Do you think that people are basically lazy? Or are they really industrious? Are people pretty dull and stupid? Like a bunch of sheep? Sweet but stupid? Or are they really creative people that just need, a little incentive or spark, or just turn them loose and they'll do wonderful things? Do you think that people are basically irresponsible? Or are they responsible? If you ask them to do something, can you trust them to get it done? Or will they just blow it off and go to the beach or play or whatever? Okay. Are people in need of coercion? Or are they capable of self-direction? You have to stand there with the stick and just watch them every minute, whether they're on an assembly line or, go up and down the hall and police the offices to make sure that they're in there, that they're working, that they're not talking on the telephone, that sort of thing. Or can you just say, here's what I need done, hand them the job, send them on their way, and you know that in a few hours or whatever the timeline is, they'll be back with that information. Well, think about that, because where you land on that continuum determines whether you're a classical theory X type manager or whether you're a human relations theory Y type manager. And we'll pick up next time with those managerial styles.